Peter, I think we've had conversations before about how these works are generated, and as I understand it, there's no drawings.
That's right.
No photographs.
No photographs.
So that it's the perhaps distant memories, but more the imagination.
Yes, but also, Basil, I get the feeling that it's the way the painting, as it develops, dictates the image. It's as though through my what I think of as what a painting needs, you know, the abstracts of the painting, that it's through that the image that I end up with either emerges and feels worth keeping, or it doesn't hold. It doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
But it's all done through this scanning the rectangle all the way through, so that any idea I had in the beginning is 9 times out, any visual image I had in the beginning is 9 times out of 10 will be completely buried under several attempts and so on. And as I say, it feels as though the abstract rightness of the work is having the say in what is allowed to come through as the image. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I've thought a lot about how these works might be generated, and with the previous conversation in mind, that there were no photographs,
no
drawings,
photographs, no.
And not even memories, perhaps, that you could draw on. But imagination certainly must play a part.
Yes, it does.
But so in terms of perhaps a diligent painter of naturalism, natural events, they may end up with something completely different, even if they were trying to depict storms and shorelines as are prominently expressed here. They might see too much detail. I don't know. They might see too much detail that somehow blunts the. I regard these images as being absolutely. They're very intense, and they seem to be expressing something other than just the appearances.
Yes, I would have thought so.
And the appearances grow out of your knowledge as a painter with the actual stuff that you're working with.
Yes.
On the surface that you're working on.
Yes. Yeah.
And there seems to be the idea of these images revealing themselves to you, in a sense, or you discovering them through the process of making.
That's it in a nutshell. That is it, yeah.
And so that in a way, they seem to be even more extraordinary.
Well, I hope so.
No, but I would submit that somehow the metaphorical vision for them, or if there is an idea that they are not just depictions of natural phenomena as it might be seen, but they are delving into a level of understanding, metaphorical understanding, that they are to do with the problem, the human experience of life, if you like. That somehow is deeply engraved in these images, I think.
Well,
found the way they are.
Yes, that's.
I think they're more intense because you're not looking at anything.
You think what, sorry?
I think they become more intense and more focused
Yeah.
because they're not. You're not remembering a particular place.
I agree with that. I agree.
A particular event.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I can't say to you, because I'm, you know, painting, I'm actually making them, is what their relationship is to human experience, or that's for other people to say.
Sure.
I just try and get on with, as I say, this sense, trying to make these images which fulfill my needs as an abstract painter, for one thing, and then have a believability, you know, that these places, these scenes, if you like, could exist. They don't, of course.
No.
They don't exist. And it's in that process that other things get into the painting. You know, that it isn't a shortcut, say, that when people are working from photographs, often it's a very short cut between the image and the painting. Well,
there's a different intention.
Different altogether.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that the driving force behind the way in which these are realized with paint on a surface is driven not just simply through you being steeped in having studied natural phenomena and recognizing it on the canvas, but it's driven by, and I think that, in fact, I should quote later on perhaps from Hilary Sperling's piece, that they are really to do with an innerscape.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
And that suggests a metaphorical need to find images that go beyond the appearance of the particular scene.
Yes, absolutely.
They stand for something else as well. It doesn't mean that the knowledge of the behavior of wind and sea and shore it has not been experienced. It clearly has, but it's not the work of a diligent representational artist of such a scene. And I think that's an important difference. I think. And that's what I think makes these works operate on a very potent, intense metaphorical level.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, absolutely. As I say, I'm not prepared to say whether they are, you know, because there are several words used in relation to my painting. Not all the time, but more than occasionally.
Right.
Mystery, the sublime, and metaphor. Now, I know what these words mean, obviously, but I'm not prepared to say whether these paintings touch on those things. That's for other people to decide, you know.
But nevertheless, you've already agreed that perhaps.
Oh yes, I want them to.
Yes.
I'd like
but
them
you don't
to.
know. You don't know how you're going to kind of retain these things.
There's no way you can't load it in.
No. If you get a recipe for it, you've had it.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah.
So they have to be discovered during the process of making.
Yes.
And
yes.
And the choices are not all to do with. Well, they must be to do with making sure that this is a very stormy sea.
Yes.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yes. There is that. There is that.
There is the. You know, the viewer is in the presence of storm conditions.
Yes.
And what the wind does to the sea when it is like that.
Yes.
And how that certainly a sense of anxiety and a threat that goes with that, I think.
Yes.
I know that the title of the exhibition is Returning from the Shore,
Yeah.
not to the shore.
Yeah.
If you were in those conditions at sea, you'd be wanting to gain the shore.
Yes.
You'd want to get out of the condition.
Well, there is.
But you are
yes.
when you've titled it "Returning from the Shore," it's almost as if the shore and the sea threatening the shore, and the safety aspect of being on the shore, even the shoreline or the coastline, is not even a safe place to be.
Yeah.
That somehow you're moving away from the shore.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that title comes from a period of reflection after you've made these works, where you're surveying them in a way that you have to be away from that meeting point of those conditions.
I think the title came into my mind because I've been feeling recently that that I did want to make some landscape images again, which, I mean, there aren't too many in the show, but there are 2 or 3, several, and that's what that was about. Of just not a feeling that maybe the best was past in terms of the sea imagery.
Right.
But whether, the fact is one goes on doing them.
So what about the flyover and the?
Well, this is a recent one.
Yes. Is that your attempt to get away from this?
It's a painting I found myself doing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, and I did think when I found myself, because I always find myself doing things. I never seem to be able to impose my a rational reason. I found myself painting making that image or working with that type of imagery, and then thinking, oh, this is good. I've come away from the sea.
Yes. To perhaps a different view of the world. I don't know.
I don't know either about that.
But I think you're making paintings to find out what you're feeling.
Yes, exactly. And
I expect the decisions in the making, apart from it, you're making it look like a very stormy sea, is embedded in those choices, is moves that you make with the paint, with the actual paint, to push or present that other level of meaning that somehow is not really tangible until you recognize it in the painting.
I think
when you've achieved it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you put your finger on
a retrospective discovery.
Yeah. There's there is very little there's very little preordained about these paintings.
Right.
As I say, they do emerge from many twists and turns, and it's likely that the subject matter of the painting can change enormously during the course of the canvas, because that's what it is. It's a canvas.
No.
But I mean, in a way, you see, this conversation goes. If I think of when going back to my early 20s, when after I'd been at Goldsmiths and been very influenced by American art, abstract art, and then Rauschenberg and John Cage, and so on. But somehow, at a certain point, after a year in Italy, or during a year in Italy, thinking, well, you know, or feeling that I wanted to get back to the sort of paintings I did when I was 14.
14. Well, I didn't
Believe
know
it or
that.
not. Yeah, no, because that's when I started, you know.
Yeah.
Got really, you know, very, very involved, and probably one of the best paintings I've ever done I did when I was 16 at a school in the dinner break. But that's besides the point. But when I started to re-engage with representation again in a traditional space in my early 20s, that's all it was. It was a fascination with representation. And obviously, that wasn't enough. But when I tried to get back to making paintings, which I, for the sake of simplicity, one could call collage paintings, not college, CLLLAGE, where things were, you know, brought together. It just didn't satisfy, it didn't work. And I was stuck with this primitive, is primitive the right word? This very basic business of making a traditional space. That's all I could do. Anything else I attempted, just, and so there's this saying, isn't there, that if you're digging a hole, if, you know, stop digging. Well, I went on digging, and I think by going on digging, what has got into the work has enriched and broadened, if I can say that about my own.
You can, and but and of course these are recent works and very mature works.
Yes.
And that's to do with getting older.
Yes. Well. Yes.
As well
as
developing the practice.
Yes.
But there's the aspects of nature or natural events in nature, like the weather, like what the weather does to the sea. We know there's a sun up there, but there's no visible sun.
No.
No. And we know how symbolic some of these conditions do suggest in terms of the psychic. And I'm not a psychologist at all, but we are confronted by darkness, impending dusk, you know, impending night, if you like, difficulty of seeing through mist, and ferocious weather in connection with the sea is always, because we know what it's like to be on a boat at sea. These thoughts are threatening in a way, even in this particular time when we've got modern technology that gives us modern vehicles, modern boats, and all that. It may be that perhaps some people might think that this case of the weather that threatens, but did it nevertheless in the 18th century did attract people.
Nevertheless, what, sorry?
Did attract people to go and visit places of cliffs, mountains, seas. They were curious about these things, and they got a kind of a certain pleasure.
I would say, you know, in other words, you're talking about the sublime, the traditional traditional qualities associated with that Storm and Drang sort of business. But I would say, because of the the way these paintings are made, and the complexity of the process, that I think that that they contain. I mean, and by saying this, I'm taking a chance because they could be not contain these things. But I think they contain something beyond that the usual recipe of the sublime. I think they are very, very, actually quite personal paintings, you know.
Absolutely.
Very personal.
No, I
paintings.
agree very much with that. Yeah, we were talking about that. Perhaps from the 18th century, there was an awareness of nature in a way that was actually welcomed by a lot of people.
Yes.
They enjoyed the risk.
They enjoyed being
danger.
frightened.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I just want to quote a bit from Hilary Sperling's very sensitive and perceptive piece in the introduction. And she says, she's talking about the that kind of tradition. And she's saying, he, that's Peter, in this sense, a true romantic with an ominous overtones of risk and danger that Wordsworth, and for that matter, Archer's predecessor and progenitor, J.M.W. Turner, once posed for their contemporaries before the intervening centuries turned both of them into beacons of comfort and reassurance. I think these are very contemporary paintings, and I think that what you're talking about is a timeless thing. But these are nevertheless, they're not. Well, they're along the same themes, but as you pointed out, they are very to do with very personal views. And I think the issues that are somehow come to mind in terms of the beyond the simply be descriptive of storms at sea and so on, they are deeply felt and have a timeless and definitely a contemporary feel.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm very pleased to hear that.
Yeah, because maybe a lot of people would just say, oh, well, we know about that aspect of landscape painting, sea painting. Yeah, we've seen it before, but nevertheless, these have a personal depth to them, I think.
Yeah.
That is, it could only be done through being strongly associated with you, your character, your thoughts.
Yeah.
In spite of what you said about not knowing quite what you're going to discover when you paint, when you make the painting, I think that in itself is a belief that if you stood in front of the scene itself, you wouldn't end up with paintings like this.
No, I wouldn't. No. I wouldn't want to.
That's why I proposed if there was a parallel artist looking or thinking about the same thing, the sea, a diligent, talented painter of the appearance of things, he or she wouldn't end up with such works that had a depth of reference, metaphorical reference to the business of being human.
Music to my ears, Basil.
Well,
music to my ears.
Well, this is what I've always felt about your work, and it's amplified in this particular exhibition in a very, very poignant and impressive and intense way.
Yeah, and in order to go on that level, I'm repeating myself, but I have to banish those thoughts in order to grapple with the painting as it develops, not to take any shortcuts, not to sell myself anything shoddy, and to really go through the whole process, time after time, of finding the right equation between abstraction and image, and in doing that, these other qualities that you've elucidated, I think, come into play unconsciously.
Yes,
or half consciously.
Let's put it like this: there is an aim, but it's an oblique aim.
An element of...
You're aiming obliquely.
I'm aiming obliquely, yeah.
If that isn't a contradiction, it is a kind of contradiction, but it's more, I think it's more accurate about what you're talking about. It also puts the question against, what do you learn from what you do?
Yeah, well...
I mean, what is it in the process of making these that sticks with you when you face an empty canvas again?
It's
the process, isn't it?
It's the process. It's the process which can be at times exhilarating when you feel it's going well, and it's the process which at other times, when I feel that what's there is just not going to yield anything, and I have to destroy what is there, and so I'm just left with an obliterated image, and in an effort to get at something which is more satisfying. That's the word I can use, satisfying. I can't say deeper, I can say satisfying. And there's no short-circuiting that process. If I'm going to go on painting, I have to go put myself through that roller coaster.
You don't want to kind of define what it is you're going to paint because you don't know.
No, I don't know, exactly.
And you have to convince yourself that the last painting that you then have a point of drawing back from it when it's complete, and you can realize some of the things we've been talking about in terms of metaphor and how it affects you personally in a deep way. But you don't know what how to make these paintings, except to be involved in the process of finding.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's right. So it's like starting from the beginning with each one, with hopefully just enough confidence to know that I will, if I go on pushing, I will get to something which is, as I say, this word satisfying, is that for me, that is the...
It has to work that way. It has to work that way.
Yes, there's no, if I was just a sort of, I mean, we were talking earlier about an artist who have people doing their work for them, Bertrand.
Right.
Well, there's no way that could ever.
No.
And the same for you, and there's no way that could ever be a possibility. No way.
No. There are the flyover and the only reference to humans, I guess, in these paintings are the imagined people driving the cars that have the headlights on.
Yes, or the people on the ships.
But we are the humans.
Yeah.
We're on the shore. But we're not visible. And do the flight of starlings come into that?
Does what, sorry?
The flight of starlings, the paintings.
Well, yes, because actually those sort of fields that I painted in the at least two of the starling pictures, wandered about those sort of fields, you know, and taken great pleasure from being in that sort of place, both when I was very young and more recently. So I think I am there with those images. In fact, I'm more there with the landscape images than I am with the sea images, as far as I know, because when I this is on a conscious level, and thank God, I feel that it's possible to do work which is built on things other than conscious intention, you know. And so with the sea paintings, I mean, when I lived, I still live quite close to the sea, but whenever I've gone to the sea or go to the sea, I think, oh, this is a bit of a cliche. But when I'm in the studio and a sea image is emerging, it feels worth doing.
Well, I think in a way, difficult to know what you're thinking about. You're obviously thinking about making the image, but there is a kind of a certain, I would imagine, a certain excitement, or in making an image that has all the kind of the effects of making you anxious, and the danger of the actual, but it's always imagined.
It's always imagined, and actually the real danger for me is the danger of making the painting and whether it'll turn up, whether it'll work out, you know.
Yes, well.
Because you mentioned the flyover painting with the trees and the evening fly. Well, that's not such a dangerous image, but it was just as dangerous and difficult to paint, to find and locate.
Yeah. Well, I said they all have a sense of isolation.
Well, maybe that's
they seem to be weighted in that sense, and also the evidence of the wreck of a ship. There's some kind of dramatic disaster happens.
Yes.
You know, and I said, we're thinking about humans again. Did anybody escape from it?
Well,
you know, there's a bit of a story imminent there, and we glimpse, we peer through the mist. It's the doubt, it's the uncertainty that is expressed strongly in the imagery that I think these works carry and express beyond their simple appearance.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
And that's what is constant about these works.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go on painting if I just felt that I was just dishing up appearance. I really wouldn't.
No. I think we've established that.
You know, I do have enough faith in them, in the paintings, and in myself to think that something is going on which doesn't add up in obvious terms, that it's what is being said is quite a complex proposition. But I don't know much about what that is. I'm just prepared to believe that they do have something beyond the obvious.
Yes.
You know?
And I think that you achieve that in a very intense way, and I think that I can't imagine anybody looking at these works that wouldn't pick up on something of that kind.
Good.
That they're not. They don't have to be. the drive is not to do with simply seeking to represent appearances.
No, sure.
But the appearances have to be achieved.
Yes.
But
they have to be honoured.
But yeah, they have to be honoured.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it. And I think, but I think that they go further than that. They represent something else, and it's something to do with your character, who you are, and
that's right.
where you are in life.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
No, I think Hilary Sperling's piece is wonderful. Just the first sentence of the last paragraph, the penultimate, the second from last. The depth and darkness of art, and the darkness Archer paints are essentially internal, and that, I think, says it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree.